Hey, good morning, YouTube. This morning we're going to go through the inflation numbers to see what the government is doing, what the effects will be on your things like rent and costs. I find that on one hand they say that they are working on inflation and creating, trying to decrease the costs and things. On the other hand, they actually are the source of the problem and creating the inflation. And so you have to really watch what they're doing because there's a lot of people telling half-truths and things in the situation and in many situations, and you have to understand that there are things you can look at to see underlying what is actually happening so that you can position yourself the best way for you and your family. So let's get into this real quick. Here is the overall graph of the federal money supply. Now the money supply means printing of dollars. In various forms and ways, whether it be from the Fed buying treasuries or things behind the scenes that you don't see like that, or actually printing the dollars. This tracks inflation. Inflation is actually how much money is available to represent the good faith and credit of our government. Right now, good faith and credit, you can see over a period of time they've shown what they're going to do. Here is COVID going crazy when money was destroyed for different reasons. And so we're going to start at this inconsistency. And so they're going down here in the money supply. Here they're tightening. And here in October of last year, they start to print money again. And they tell you they're going to print money, but you look at October to September, and that is, 500 and something billion dollars that they printed. And the reason that they're printing this money is to pay debt and expenses because they're spending more than they make. And so they print the money to pay those, and the Fed buys the money, buys that printed debt, and it is in the system, and you are paying it as a tax that you don't see on the money that you have. This is the reason that assets go up in value, is because assets are measured in dollars, but they are not, the value is not determined by dollars. And so as an asset sits there in a house someone lives in, it has a value, and that value doesn't go down as they print money. It stays the same, and the money just gets worth less and less. So we're going to look at the effects of this. Why is your rent going up? How much higher will it be going? Who is the cause of that? Most people do not know. They would blame, corporations and things because it's easy to blame them. But what's going on behind the scenes? Who's creating it? And those type of things. So we're going to pop over here and we're going to look at rentals. And we're going to look at the two biggest cost factors in rentals that are determined by the government. We are not going to look at interest rates. So let's say interest rates had stayed the same. And so those interest costs for people that borrowed money, such as landlords, was the same. Let's say it was the same. Now, as you know, it isn't the same. It was, 4% before, and now it's 8%, so the interest cost has doubled. And so that's 100% increase. If they had passed that straight to you, your rent would have doubled. So if your rent was $1,000, it would now be $2,000. So we're going to look at the underlying effects and causes here. And so the first thing we're going to look at is taxes, property taxes. Your property taxes are determined mostly by your school system. 75-80% of your property taxes goes to schools. They have got massive increases in the money that they have. They didn't turn down any of it, and they're using it. That's what they do. So if you look at a new house, I bought a house. It has a taxable value right now before I buy it of 29,580, which is a percent of the value. Current tax is 1476. Now, market value is a taxable value is 46,000. So when I buy it, it will adjust the rate in 1 year to the new actual taxable value, which will mean the taxes will be in 1 year they will go from 1476 to 2538. So that is an increase of 71.94% in 1 year. So if you rented this house and your landlord, let's say, sells the house to someone else who has to pay these property taxes, that's an additional, we'll say $100 a month that has to be paid. So if he increases your rent by $100, he's actually not increasing your rent. He's actually just passing along to you this rent increase, this increase in cost from your school district. Right? So really the school district is causing it. Now they're behind the scenes, so people don't see that, but that's what's happening. You can see the number here, it changes right there. Now if you have an existing house, like I have an existing rental, had it for a while, current tax is $16.99. New tax rate can only go up by 10%. And so next year's tax, 10% increase, is $18.69. Okay? So if you get a 10% increase in your rent, he might be following this tax rate. Okay? Giving the 10% or passing that percent along, because he doesn't know all the factors of the insurance, because he's got this 10% and he had a 100% increase in the interest expense that he has. You see, we'll talk about insurance rates down below are 20 and 77%. So if he passes along 10%, he's actually passing along the lowest tax, the lowest increase that was given to him. Okay? And if he does lower than that, he's actually losing money versus the year before. He's spending more on taxes than the increase, spending more on insurance than the increase, and more on interest than the increase. So he's actually trying to not pass those taxes along. So if you look at this one though, and the value is 5938, the assessed value, and the taxable value will only be 34, you see that there's a difference, and this difference will come out as a 10% increase per year in that taxable cost. Now, you're currently, as a renter, paying through the landlord $132 per month for property taxes. Okay? After those 10% increases occur, which are built in, so if your house didn't go up in value at all, if there's no inflation at all, then it's still going to increase the next 7 years. So your rent's going to have to go up the next 7 years, depending on whether he uses 10% or this 22%, or which of these places that are coming to him he uses. Until you're paying $275.93 per month passed to the landlord in taxes. That's an increase of 108%, thanks to the school district that's getting 80% of that money through your taxes. And so that's about 7 years, and that is assuming those 7 years will have no inflation. Now, is there inflation? Yes. We just looked at inflation. Here is the money supply in October 2023. Here's the money supply in 2024. That's a $559 billion change. That's a 2.71% increase. So over these 7 years, if you just do and let's just do this times 1.02. And this is assuming that they're only going to increase the money supply by the amount they're increasing it now, when they're saying they're not increasing it. So you see what I'm saying? I mean, once they say they're increasing it, then they're going to probably jack up that rate even higher. And so you go 2025, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31. So you're probably looking at a minimum additional amount of taxes coming to your landlord of 23%. And that is if you're in an area the houses are not increased in value, only on 2.7%. And so probably not realistic to expect that. I would expect 4 to 8%. Let's go with 4, and then we'll see how long that your rent will have to increase by. Okay, so total increase 36.8, which adds probably another 4 years on top of the 2031 year, and so you're looking at basically a built-in increase of 10% per year in property taxes for this average rental house for the next 10-11 years. And that's 10% if they go with 10%. Now, we'll look down here at the 1-year increases for insurance rates and see kind of how that plays in. State Farm, I think the rates that I saw increased were 21%. They're probably trying to keep me as a customer or landlord as a customer, because 21% factors in part of this, but it doesn't factor in the massive hit from the tornado we had in Northwest Arkansas. Farmers is probably passing along the entire increase in cost to them at 77%. So we're going to try to requote those, drop those, move those to somebody else, and see how that works, or maybe restructure that. But 77%. And if you can imagine, going to a tenant and telling them your rent is $1,000 now, and after this it's going to be this times 1 plus this, your rent's going to $1,770. That would be a passing through of this farmer's cost directly. And so if you have 1,000 and you go by insurance in 1 year, you're now at $1,770. If you have 1,000 and you go by your lowest property tax increase, then you're at $1,100. Lowest property. If you're at 1,000 and you go by your purchase increase, then you're at $1,700. And if you go by your lowest insurance increase, you're at $1,200. And really, this percent doesn't include the increase in property management fees that you're paying, because those are a percent. And so if it's based on your lowest insurance, and $1,700 if it's based on property taxes that you're paying up. If it's based on interest rates, interest expense, I would say it's around, you'd be around $3,000 a month. So in here is the variety of effects this can have on your rental rate. And so if you get an increase, let's say of 8%, to like 1080 of 8%, you're basically getting a landlord that is eating that increase, at least partially. But the problem that they're going to have is that if they're in this situation and it goes up 10% per year, and this goes up 8% per year, they're behind 2% per year. And so at some point they won't have a choice but to either bump rent or start matching the increases that are coming to them, which are anywhere between 10 and 77%. So that's what's happening. That's the inflation. It is going up. inflation is being built in by the government. If it wasn't, then this rate would be zero or negative, like it was back in 2022. But it's not. And so if you watch the empty money supply, you will see the underlying inflation that is going to even increase more these built-in cost increases that are happening now. What can help this situation? If expenses lower, so if interest lowers, but when interest lowers, you remember the interest expense isn't built in, and so that helps the landlord. So if you got a landlord doing 8%, lowering this interest expense helps him to keep your rate below what's coming to him, right? Because that lowers his underlying expenses. Insurance, but insurance is a market, and you have losses and things like that. Property taxes are pretty much built in at the increase of 10%. This isn't going to change. So this is just happening. Maybe the school system would not take all the money. Maybe they say, hey, I don't need a 108% increase in what I have. Rare that happens. It has happened before, but rare that happens. Interest rate, fuel prices, maybe. I don't know. But I would say pretty much you have built-in increases that are going to make your rent go up a minimum of 8% a year for the foreseeable future. And if the rents don't go up by 8% a year, or the market doesn't allow that, then you'll see problems in that market. You'll see houses not available to rent. You'll see shortages, and those shortages then will cause the rents to go up, which will fix the shortages. So that's basically what we're going to run into, and I just wanted to share it with you today because I think a lot of people don't understand where inflation is coming from, where the causes are, and what's happening. If this increase here for school systems, and they could show us how that's going to increase things like teacher salaries or people's ability to pay this rent, great. But most of the time I don't think it does. I see a lot of new track fields and things like that, which is it's a government entity. They can't save the money, they can't plan forward, and so they have to do the best they can do in the situation they're in. I get that. So hope this is valuable for you, and look at the decisions you can make once you understand what's really happening, and do the best you can. I'll talk to you later. Bye.